I did everything I thought that rock and roll was, and it was.
This is rock and roll. Get on board or sling your hook.
Strap the guitar on and thrash it to death, basically, you know. The first impressions of David was like, he was very straightforward. He was always really straightforward. He knew what he wanted to do, and he sort of got on and did it, you know. And that's what I kind of remember most of him, you know, most about him. And he was, you know, quite a giving sort of person too, you know, a very kind person. And that's what really struck me about him. And also you knew he was going to be, you weren't here messing about, you know, he was going to be somebody, you know. You can kind of tell that off somebody, you know, you get that off some people, you don't get it off other people. He was one that you definitely got that vibe with. You know, he was going to be a star or something, you know, right away. The debut of Hype at the Roundhouse, I remember that was one of the first times we really got into dressing up, you know. I think David was dressed up like Spider-Man. I might be wrong here, I can't, you know. John Cambridge, the drummer, I think he had a kind of a gold suit on. I think he was dressed like some sort of a gangster. I was dressed in a gangster suit. And Tony Visconti, he was playing bass then. I think he was dressed like a Batman or something. He wore a cape. And as the sunrise stream flickers on me, my friends talk of glory, untold dream, where all is God and God.
Bowie was looking, I think, at the time for a band, and he was using this band as his backing band. And they did a few gigs, and then poor John got kicked out again. And Mick rang me up, Bowie rang up and said, well, Mick says you're really good, I want you to come and join me. So I said, yeah, okay. I guess he was a folk guitarist when we first joined him. He did gigs on his own. In fact, I did a few gigs with him just playing congas. We'd go and do like 2 gigs a night in London, a pub here and a roundhouse. We'd just go, oh, let's go and do a gig. And he'd play his songs and I'd just sit on a mat and play bongos, you know. So it was a completely different scene, and we'd been sort of anti-folk, to be honest. We weren't into folk music. I mean, it just wasn't rock and roll, you know. But then we heard the songs, and I guess our job was turning them into rock and roll things. We understood the rock and roll viewpoint and the playing. So a lot of times it was taking a folk guitarist's song that was an incredible song and putting it into a rock and roll format. So Mick would change some of the chords and do this, and just to make it rock it up. But you couldn't ignore the songs and the lyrics. It was just so different and so emotional, and it was him. I mean, nobody writes like him. That was inspiring.
In the corner of the morning, the best. I would sit and blame the master, first and last. All the roads were straight and narrow, and the prayers were small and yellow, and the rumor spread that I was aging fast.
Well, I'd done Man Who Sold the World album with Mick and Tony Visconti on bass. That was the start, really. That was the start of, I guess, really getting used to Bowie's writing, and some of the strange chord sequences and time signatures. Just getting familiar with how he wrote. It wasn't what you normally expected. We'd come up through sort of blues, a little bit of Tamla Motown, into early Zeppelin and very much into Hendrix and Cream. So our basics in music was in that area. So on that first album, we got it out of our system. You know, it was like, oh, I'd love to play a drum fill like that, and it seems to fit this song, so it went in there. So for us, that was the first time in a studio, Mick and I.
They came back to Hull after making that album and doing a few gigs with Bowie, and they decided they didn't really want to play anymore with David. And they wanted to form a band, and they needed a bass player. So I agreed to sort of sit in till they found somebody, and I never left. And I finished up joining in the end. You know, it was such good fun. You know, they're good musicians and stuff, that I finished up joining them. And then one day we got a phone call from Bowie, and he called Mick and he said, would we go down and do a radio show, the John Peel show? And I wasn't supposed to play bass. I was supposed to, Ebby Flowers was playing bass. I was just going to go down for the ride. So I went down with them, and we got there on a Sunday afternoon, and first time I'd ever met David at Haddon Hall and stuff. And I went in there and he had Woody set his kit up and Mick set his guitar amp up, and then all of a sudden all these mates of David's appeared that were going to sing backing vocals and sing with him on this John Peel show. And then all of a sudden Bowie turned around to me and says, well, are you going to set your bass gear up then? And I said, what? So Ebby Flowers was doing it, you know. And he said, no, Ebby can't do it, can you do it? So I said, all right, yeah. So we spent about 2 hours rehearsing, and in that period of time I had to learn 12 Bowie songs. And some of them were off Hunky Dory, which nobody had ever really played before, you know, so it was quite nerve-wracking event to actually get that many songs off for a radio show. Plus I'd never played on radio before, so I was really nervous. Plus I'd never met any of these people, you know. And that was my introduction to David, and of course we went to the John Peel show the next day. And from then on, I think it was the following week, we did Hunky Dory.
Working with David was different. It was, you know, sometimes a matter of keeping up with where he was going. I mean, he had a knack of not knowing anything about studios, which he doesn't. He didn't. I don't know if he does now. And he'd see an accordion or a trumpet or some instrument that the band who'd just been recording had left behind, and we'd be saying, this track needs something else. And he'd go, oh, I know what, let's use the accordion. And we would be going, oh, you're joking, that won't work, that doesn't fit. And he would do it and mess about with it, and it would work. And like nobody could see it. Nobody could see, obviously, what he could see to do with it, which was quite odd, because sometimes you were convinced it was a waste of time.
We went to the pub together, we went to restaurants together, we did everything. You know, when we first started gigging, even before the concept of Ziggy had come up, we were out doing some pub gigs and stuff. And Bowie had an old Rover, and we'd sling all our gear in the back of the Rover, and we'd all get in the car, and he'd drive off to the gig, and we'd play the gig, and then we'd all drive back to Haddon Hall. So it was like a band thing, you know. It was a band, except that he was David Bowie, you know, and we were the band with him, behind him, you know. So it was all done together. It was all. We did everything. Everywhere we went was together and stuff. I think he liked that because he'd been on his own for so long as just a solo artist doing acoustic stuff, that to have the band around him all the time, he could bounce off us, you know, which was great for him, and it was great for us. Haddon Hall was a huge house, massive, and Bowie, it was all turned into different flats, and Bowie had the downstairs flat, which was the front door, and you walked in the front door and there was this huge hall with a massive staircase that went up, and he had all the rooms downstairs. And at the top of the staircase, all the rooms were closed off, they were all boarded off for the other flats. And we used to actually have mattresses, and we slept on the landing at the top. We slept there for months and months and months while we were putting all this together, you know. But my time there was brilliant. It was a real effort together to put that band together, and we rehearsed there, and we did everything together as a band, you know. It was really, really was fun.
What about where he was living at Haddon Hall? Did that seem strange and exotic, or?
No, it just seemed big. I mean, it seemed big, you know, coming from where I come from, Hull, you know, up north, you know. This place seemed like, yeah, it seemed like a big, quite a fancy place, really. It was nice, you know. I've fond memories of all that stuff. It was great.
We all lived in one house at that time, so, you know, you'd wake up in the morning, grab your coffee, and David would just be starting pretty things, and you'd think, oh, that sounds interesting, that's got my ear. The next day he'd call me in and say, oh, I've finished that track, and he'd play it. Well, that's good, you know. And sometimes it would go, well, let's go in the studio tomorrow and put that one down. So you'd go in, but he'd already been working on another one. So you'd get all set up, ready to do that track, and you'd say, oh no, we're not doing that one. We're going to do Kooks or something. And you go, what? We don't know that one. Oh, didn't I play you that? I'll play you it now. So you were ready to record. He would play the song, and Trevor and I would be going, was there a medley? You know, how many choruses? What does it go out on? You know, what's the, you know? And so we were really in touch with each other during the actual take.
You just did it, you know, you had to. You were on the edge. I mean, especially because I didn't really know him at that time. It was like I'd only known him a couple of weeks, and I was working for this guy, and he wanted things done this way, but he wanted it done quickly, and it was quite nerve-wracking.
And we never went to 3 takes on any stuff we ever did with Bowie. It was usually the first take of a number that we didn't know, right? Or if something messed on that one badly, then 2 takes. Some did go to 3, actually, but very, very rarely, and we never went to 4. But it was good because it put you on an edge.
I mean, he was lucky. I mean, I look back now and I think he was very lucky that when we came and joined him, the band, it was a bunch of very good musicians that had played together as a band for a long time. We all came from the same area, and we were all brought up on blues and rock, and you know, and Jeff Beck and Cream, and we all played in that sort of style. And with the band being so tight as it was as a band, when we joined him, we played very tight together. We knew what each other was going to do. We knew how to play together as a band, and we used that on his songs. And I think that's what worked so well with him, was the band behind him.
I think as a drummer, it was good for me because there was a lot of learning curves through that period. The songs weren't all like, say, Hendrix or Zeppelin or Sabbath, where you could have one sort of approach as a drummer, and you knew that would sort of work, and you just found in the beat, because it was piano and strings and lighter songs, heavier songs.
Well, with Hunky Dory, I mean, I'd already rehearsed like 4 or 5 songs doing the John Peel show within that 2-hour period. So I knew some of the bass lines and I knew the songs, but we never really rehearsed for Hunky Dory at all. It was, you're going, he plays the song on the piano or on the acoustic guitar, you get a run through, or maybe 2 if you're lucky, and then you start taking, you know, I mean, there goes that red light, and you have to get your bass lines together and stuff, and it's got to go down, you know. I mean, Hunky Dory took about I think it was 2 weeks to make.
Don't you know you're driving your ambitions by best shame? Let me say it again, you gotta make way for the homo superior.
I mean, when I met him, when I first joined the band, when he came back to Hull, he'd just taken one of his levels in music at the music college, and he just passed that. I think it's level whatever it is, 10 or whatever, and he just started writing a bit of music. He's practicing it. And of course, when we did Hunky Dory, Bowie says, "Well, why don't you write the strings?" And it was like, oh god. he spent many a night up late sweating.
We went out for dinner and was with Dana Gillespie. And Dana wanted some tracks recording, and some of them needed, like strings. And David said, "Oh, that's all right. Mick does string arrangements. He's going to do what you're saying." I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, like, I've never done one before in my life, and I had to go home and do it, But it was great, I mean, it was real good. It was like ploughing in head first, Then you didn't have a synthesizer. You couldn't sort of play it on a synthesizer and sequence it and it'd play it all back to you, I mean, you kind of had to do it out your head or pick up a guitar or just check it on the piano, You just kind of played this thing. Write it out, basically, in your head and then check it, It was a very good way to get into it. It was like kind of being thrown head first into it. David was really good at that too. He was always good at kind of pushing you forward to do something. And that's one of the greatest things about him, that he would let that happen, I mean, I can think of a million people that would say, like, "Oh no, he can't do that," and automatically dismiss it and get somebody that can do it, And I always remember David for doing them things. He would always push you forward,
Oh, you pretty things, don't you know you're driving your mom and by best shame?
I mean, it was just have a go, if you fancy having a go, have a go at it. I listened to many a Still a Black record, I remember that. Stealing string parts of Still a Black.
You gotta make way for the homo superior.
It's perfect. I mean, I love Hunky Dory as an album. It's my favourite album out of all the albums I played on. I think it's a great album, and it's just got some magic about it. That's you can listen to it anywhere, at any time, and it lifts you up. It's great.
What we thought would work had worked, and we had the mixes back in Trident Studios in London, and it was just like, whoa. It wasn't even that it would sell, or it would, it was more, it worked for us. We thought it was good. And then later on, when you listened again, you thought, it's very different, so it'll either really go or really bomb out, Luckily it went.
I always thought Hunky Dory was a great album, There were great songs on that album, beautiful songs. Ziggy Stardust, great songs on that album too. That was the essence of it, it's the songwriting, the songs were there, You went in the studio, you hammered this song out, and that was it. I mean, we didn't really spend that long, didn't do that many takes on each one. We kind of played it, and that, as long as the arrangement was basically there, as long as it had a beginning and an ending, and it went to the right place in the middle, I mean, that was all one could ask for,
We went into Trident Studios, and I'd done like some stuff on the BBC session, which I had to learn. But we went in the studio, and it was like, well, here's the song. Play it. Oh, all right. And you just went in and you played what you wanted, And he never says, I want you to play this, I want you to play that. I mean, me and Mick would sit down and work out some parts, because you'd have string arrangements like on Life on Mars, and he'd work out parts to go with the bass and stuff. So we'd work certain things out, but it was go in there and play. You just did it. There was no rehearsals really for Hunky Dory. Hunky Dory was very much straight in and go for it. played it through on the keyboards, and he said, well, you know, everybody in sort of from the beginning, so the bass comes in with the keyboards as he's changing these chords, and he's just doing the... And then we go into the riff. So he wrote the riff. I mean, he played that on the piano. So that was all it. And what we would do, I'd just follow the chords, you know, as I've just played you on the beginning. I'd just follow the verse chords, which is just doing root, fifth and octave on a lot of it. Basic Bowie, as he was writing in those days, keyboard rundown, you know. Songs with the bass lines running down, and then you go down, then you get the, which the string part comes in there, which is what the strings play, which is what I played, and they added the strings in over the top later on to play that.
Mick's arrangement on it is outstanding. He worked with me on some of the parts, on some of the drum parts on that, just because the strings were going to be doing these staccato parts, so the drums would have to follow, otherwise there'd be a conflict at certain parts in the arrangement.
I think it's a great song. I always remember him coming in the studio and he'd just written that lyric, the line, Mickey Mouse has grown up a cow. And he comes steaming into the control room and he said, oh, listen to this, Mickey Mouse has grown up a cow, because we all just started laughing. Until you hear it in the song, you know, I mean, it's all imagery stuff, you know, and it was brilliant in the song. But when somebody first says it, it's like, what? Yeah.
I think listening to it, you're thinking, imagination-wise, it puts you into another world altogether. And the perfect fusion of classical and rock just works. I didn't want the drums just to be a rock and roll bash behind a symphony orchestra, so I had to think with the arrangement and work out how can I emphasize it rock-wise and classical-wise, so it would be, rather than doing a drum fill of da-da-da-da-da-da on tom-toms, I'd do it on hi-hats and snare, which I hadn't heard anybody do that. So, but you had to get it really tight and make it heavy at the same time. So it was ba-ba-ba-ba-ba, bush, like that. So it was little differences like that.
It's a product of the band again, you know. I mean, it was a basic song that was played to us, and I added the bass lines, and then Ronson wrote the string parts, and he used some of the bass lines to go with the string parts, and then Rick came along and did all the keyboards over the top and stuff. So it was, to make the song sound like that, it was a band thing, definitely. But David wrote the song.
Rick Wakeman played keyboards on the album. He just blew us away with his technique. We hadn't really seen a pianist play like that. And he was able to put so much technique in without it being, you know, it wasn't just technique, it was feel.
He was originally going to be one of the Spiders. Bowie had asked him to join the band, and I think he would have been great. I think he would have fitted in perfectly, but unfortunately Yes came along with a lot of money. And he went off with Yes. He'd sit down and Bowie, if it was the piano, he'd sit down and play the piano, and Rick would just maybe sit at the other end and learn the chords, and then of course Rick would then elaborate on it amazingly, a lot more than David was playing, you know, and be like free to do what he wanted.
He really gave it a classical pianist's approach, and brilliant playing. It was just, when he did the piano runs, it was just awesome. We were just like mouths open.
He was inspiring to watch play keyboards. I mean, he's just, to me, he's always has been one of the greatest keyboard players around. And in his style and everything, the way he plays.
He had everything: feel, technique, and good fun. You know, he had the technique of a classical pianist without being stuffy. he was able to be part of the unit, you know, while he was playing with us, which was good. Funny guy as well.
Wake up, you sleepyhead. Put on some clothes, get out of bed. Put another log on the fire for me. I made some breakfast and coffee.
I think from the drums it was just a simple beat that that didn't really let up, even though it was a commercial type song. It was this, and there was I remember there's an odd little fill on the hi-hat and snare, where it's like dum-bat, bat, dum-bat, bat, bum-bat, bat, dum-dum-bat, dum-bat, bat, which I hadn't heard before, but it just seemed to really lift it at the right point.
Oh, you pretty things. Don't you know you're driving your mom and some papa's insane? Let me say it again. You gotta make way for the Homo superior.
It's a pretty basic thing, really, you know. He's playing gong, 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 gong. He's playing merely the same on the keyboard. Dong, gong, gong, gong. You know, it's that sort of thing. So you don't really need to put a lot in it, you know. It's just that. And that's all there is in that song.
Watching the cruisers below.
The atmosphere we were going for was like an English musical Velvet Underground approach. It wasn't sort of all hell let loose. It was a streamlined approach to it.
Walk out of her heart, walk out of her mind. No, she's so swissy in her satin and tie, in her frock coat and bibbidi-bobbidi hat. Oh, but I could do better than that.
That song actually was given to the band by Bowie about 6 months before I ever met Bowie. He sent a song down because Mick had rung him up and said, well, because the band was doing an album for Polydor and we needed a single, and Bowie sent that song down, and we actually learnt that song 6 months before we ever played it on Hunky Dory, and we used to have it in the set.
But we still wanted to get that same atmosphere that you were in New York City and part of the happening scene and the whole thing, and I think we did.
I'm phoning a cab, 'cause my stomach feels small. There's a taste in my mouth, but it don't taste at all. Well, it could have been me, yes, it could have been me. What didn't I say? What didn't I say?
That was very much the Ziggy, beginning of the Ziggy. That was the Old Grey Whistle Test, I think, that broke us. I mean, because we'd got Starman out as a single, which was a very poppy single, but I think the Old Grey Whistle Test gave Bowie a lot more cred with some of the stuff we did on the Old Grey Whistle Test. Yeah, everything was manned. I mean, they had plastic cymbals and stuff like that, you know, and everything was covered over, drums were all covered over. I mean, it was in the early days of the Whistle Test, and thank goodness later on in the Whistle Test they started having bands playing live, but when we did it, it was in a very small studio. Very small. You could just about get a drum kit in. I mean, the way they used to film it with the two cameras made it look really big, but it wasn't.
5 Years starts with a drum intro, and that was really just setting the mood for the piece, really, getting that hopelessness into a drum beat that was interesting at the same time as everything's hopeless and we're all going to die, I guess. Sounds very deep, what you can actually do with a drum kit, but you can do it. And then the idea was to stay on that. That was like for me, that was no matter where the arrangement goes, which it does get quite embellished on the way through and more desperate, the drum beat still has that apathetic hopelessness about it all the way through. And it was good actually playing that. It was like being the stable point through all this mayhem.
Cried so much that his face was wet. Then I knew he was not lying. I heard telephones, opera house, favorite melodies. I saw boys, toys, electric irons and TVs.
It's theatre, isn't it? It was a theatre thing, you know. He always classed it as theatre. We were theatre, not just straightforward rock and roll. It was all theatre. It was the story of Ziggy on stage, you know. It was like you go to the West End and see it, I suppose, you know.
And all the nobody people.
We toured America with Ziggy. The first American tour, we went out there for 3 months and we did, I think it was 12 concerts in 3 months. We started off playing in a little place in Boston to, I think it was 200 people. And then we just went down to New York. We were there for 2 weeks. And we played at Carnegie Hall in New York. And then we went to Florida for a week, and then we went to LA for a week, and then we went to San Francisco for a week. And it was like a publicity tour. There weren't that many concerts. But we played this place in Boston to 200 people, and I always remember Tony DeFries saying, when we come back, there was a big hall next door that held 10,000 people, and we were playing in this small one that held 500. He says, we'll play that hall at the end of this tour, we'll play in that hall. And we did, we came back and did 2 nights, sold out, 20,000 people. And it was, we weren't a band that was going around like trying to sell ourselves by doing gigs. It was just the publicity that he was getting and stuff, and it was being written about in the press. That's all it was that tour. It was great.
Tony DeFries brought along to this whole thing, anything was possible. Anything you wanted to do is possible. It doesn't matter how much money it costs, forget about the cost of it, just do it. Anything was possible. And that was one of the best things that he did, you know. He had the foresight to see into that, and also, you know, like getting the press to write about Nashville Coliseum or Louisville, Kentucky, or, you know, these kind of, some of these very strange, you know, way out places we played in. These things he was very good at kind of handling, you know, like you know, the promotion from the record company. I mean, however much promotion they put into it, I'm not sure. But the whole thing about the way that the whole thing was engineered, you know, and doing the concert with all the mime dancers, you know, and for anybody off their own bat to do that, it would have cost a fortune, you know, but it didn't matter. It was like, you want mime dancers, you got mime dancers, you know. It was like, whatever it is you have to do it. And that, I thought that was great, you know.
I mean, we stayed in the Beverly Hills Hotel, we stayed in all the best hotels in New York, and everywhere we went, it was like, you know, it cost RCA Records $1 million. They lost $1 million on that tour. But it worked. You know, it got him off the ground.
There's a starman waiting in the sky. He'd like to come and meet us, but he thinks he'd blow our minds. And there's a starman waiting in the sky. He told us not to blow it, 'cause he knows it's all worthwhile. It's over. Let the children use it. Let the children use it. Let all the children boogie.
It's a perfect intro, really, the guitar, because it's nice sounding, but it's really not what you want. It's like it impinges on you because it's, come on, get on with it. I think John I'm Only Dancing was recorded while we were in the middle of an American tour. So it was, I think it was done in RCA Studios in New York. It was a strange song that didn't really follow the normal patterns of rock songs, I guess. It had little twisty bits in it. We were never common.
This is the line from the middle of John I'm Only Dancing, which is a lot of people like, a lot of bass players think it's a very good bass line.
That was the first time I think I'd ever overdubbed drums. So I played a really straight, heavy rock beat, and then the tom fills, I overdubbed them all just to get as much power that I could possibly get into the toms. It was like, forget about the feet, forget about anything else, just hit those toms as hard as you can possibly hit them. And it worked. Mick Rock did a film for John I'm Only Dancing. I'm pretty sure, if I remember, that was because we were on tour and couldn't get back to do a TV show, which may have been Top of the Pops. So it was like, Mick was on tour with us taking photos every night. So shot the video. It was filmed in a really dark room. Just a couple of lights, I remember, and lots of smoke blown across, just to get that real sleazy atmosphere. It was shot in about half a day, yeah, the whole thing. I mean, it was very low-key equipment-wise. It was just shot, basically. You know. But it did have a good feel about it, which is what communicated, you know. I still like watching it now. It looks like, ooh, I want to watch this band. I want to be there, you know. And it probably was the first real rock pop video done. But we probably don't get the credit for that, because I think Queen get that for Bohemian Rhapsody, but ours was first.
He'd been to the States and he'd got involved with Lou Reed, and he'd watched a few of the American bands. Iggy Pop was a big influence, and I think what he tried to create was an American type of sound, but with a British band.
Recording Ziggy Stardust album, that was a very quick album to do. I mean, you know, the thing was that recording in them days, you kind of, you had the song, you go in the studio and record it and leave. I mean, it was as simple as that, you know. A couple of overdubs, it was done, you know. And, you know, plus there were great songs anyway, you know.
It's really hard to say why was that a great album. It just happened. We just went in, we recorded it, and everybody loved it. Because it's not down to us. It's down to the people that buy it, it's down to the people in radio stations, it's down to the press. When they got this album, they just went wild about it.
Now Ziggy played guitar.
You know, the glam thing had started to happen with Matt Boland and stuff. And the music industry had gone through the blues stage, you know, the Beatles, the Stones, and it went into this blues stage with bands like Cream and that coming through, and the rock, and you've got the Deep Purple, and you've got all that, which was okay for the heavier people. But for the younger kids, and that, there really wasn't anything except poppy records. There wasn't anything you could like, there was no hero, superhero for them, you know what I mean? There hadn't been any for a while. And when Bowie came along with Ziggy, who was a superhero, really, they latched onto that superhero. You know, I mean, they came to see Ziggy Stardust, not David Bowie. That's what they came to see, and that was their hero. You know, and that's how it works. It's a cartoon character, and that's what he was on stage. You know, and it worked perfectly the way it was put together. And not only kids, it was right across the board, musicians, grown-ups, everybody loved the music. The songs were great, everything about it was great, you know. The stage show was different than anybody else had ever seen, and I think that's why it just went bang. We filled a gap somewhere. He was a great performer, you know. He knew how to work an audience. He had a great voice. He had this brilliant charisma on stage. Nobody had ever seen anything like it. And I think he shocked a lot of people by the way he dressed and the things he did and the way the band looked.
We had the opening night, I think it was in Tokyo, and Trevor had long hair then, so we got a hairdresser to come in and do him a samurai hairdo, and he had the big bamboo sticks or whatever sticking out, Japanese makeup, Japanese costume, and we all wore something a little bit Japanese. We'd been to see a Japanese theatre company they were doing, so they had the dragons and all the wild red hair and makeup and the white masks and all that, and this was in the middle of a rock and roll tour. This was like, whoa, that's weird, man, you know. And I'd bought a little book in this theatre, and it showed different hand movements and things that they used in theatre, because it was and then, you know, and that was one of them. And I showed David, and he went, ooh, I like that. So he went on the stage that night and did that one. Mick didn't know he was going to do it. Whoa, got the shot, and I think that went worldwide. And then all the music mags, the next week. Yeah, I guess the image of the band and the concepts of the albums was that the band didn't come from Earth, you know. So I guess we played that part to some degree. You know, when you went out there and you looked, especially in the beginning, completely different, alien, and some of the concepts were alien concepts, you played the part of not being of this earth while you're up there. I guess as an actor, to some degree, you believed in the concept of the album, or albums, and that seemed to communicate. I mean, we used to get fan mail, lots of fan mail, you know, where people actually did believe that. Said, no, Yorkshire, honest. Yeah, right, you know. Space Oddity worked really because it was different. It was David's first step really into the space strangeness.
Can you give me a mind to talk? Can you give me a mind to talk? Can you give me a mind to talk? Can you hear my floating from my tin can?
We're in San Francisco and we'd just come off stage and we had like jeans and t-shirts on, just chilling out. And three guys bulled up and they had roller skates on, dresses, beards, full makeup, earrings, the works. And they just stood in front of Mick, Trevor and I. And one guy just went, "Gee man, you're really weird." And we went, "What?" You know, it was like unbelievable. And they actually saw that we were weird, you know, and we looked at them and went, "You're joking, man," you know. I mean, we spoke to a lot and kept in touch with a lot of them, and it seemed to open a door for them to create, to experiment with clothes and looks and how they their own creates. It made it sort of okay to do things, whereas they hadn't thought about it before. This was, I guess, so wild and odd that they probably thought, well, I've got odd ideas and I've always wanted to do that, but I didn't know. So that was good. That was a good aspect of it.
The early 70s and the Ziggy Stardust period, I mean, for me, that kind of, that time brought out people going out for the evening, getting dressed up, actually going out and making an effort of getting dressed up and feel like they're going somewhere special rather than wandering out in the clothes of one at work and just going down and having a drink and seeing the local band, you know. It was, you know, all that dressing up and makeup and everything kind of freed a lot of people up, I think, and it made people express themselves a little more, you know. People did start dyeing their hair and, you know, wearing fancy clothes and putting on the makeup to go out, you know, for the evening. To me, that was great. It was, you know, it's a great relief from your everyday sort of boring life, you know, when you go to work and come home and go to work and come home, you know.
It was the image of the thing. Nobody had ever seen anything like that before. The clothes and the dressing up and the great songs. I mean, he had great songs. He wasn't like a pop band. I mean, he wasn't a glam rock band. We were never glam rock. It was never aimed at being glam rock. We were actually supposed to be like the guys out of Clockwork Orange. You know, I think they're called Droogs or something. And the boots and all the gear was supposed to look like them, but you couldn't really wear white overalls on stage, so we had to look a bit more colourful, so we wore colourful stuff on stage. A lot of people thought we were out of Star Trek. They thought we dressed up like Star Trek, and we went, "What's Star Trek?" And I know. So that was, I mean, he was a big Clockwork Orange fan. So, I mean, we used the intro music to go on stage was from Clockwork Orange and stuff. So the whole image was based around Clockwork Orange. I mean, I don't know how he thought it up, but he was writing the songs and then he twigged, hang on a minute, this is about rock and roll style, you know, this is what's happening. I could be that character. We could actually live the album on stage, you know. Almost like that's how he did it, that's how he came up with it all.
How people saw it, I don't know what people saw it as, but I have been told that it was great, the way that David was on stage and the way that I was on stage. For me, when I was on stage, I was kind of doing what I had to do, you know. I mean, just as I guess what I felt I had to do, what I felt like the way I played, you know. I think a lot of people saw it as a very good sort of counterfoil between me and David, because David would be more delicate and a little more woman-like, And I was kind of like stomping along on the side there, a bit more like a, I can't really say bricklayer, but that's kind of what I mean, you know.
I guess we were a little annoyed that we didn't have it out as a single at the time, because you could see the potential of it. But it was helping Mott out, so it was cool. They were about to break up if they didn't have a hit single, and that was definitely a hit single from the first moment you heard it. People couldn't sit down, basically. You knew when that was on, they would be up on the feet, just on the rhythm of it and the whole atmosphere of it. The Suffragette City just kicks butt. It's like it starts and it doesn't let up, and you're in a rock and roll city. You're in a rock and roll lifestyle, and that was the intention of it. The drumming on Suffragette City is very simple, but it was finding a groove that was like streamlined, that wasn't your normal rock and roll beat. It was moving. You had to get sort of real motion into it.
Ram, bam, thank you, ma'am. Suffragette City. Whoa, Suffragette City. She's so fine. Oh, I wish you were mine. Suffragette City. Whoa.
A lot of the guitar sound that's on them records was, you see here I have a Telecaster. I mean, a lot of it was played, most of it was played with a Les Paul. In fact, all of it was played with a Les Paul. And then I used to get this very sort of honking sort of sound. This doesn't work right now, otherwise I'll be able to show you how it works, but I used a Crybaby wah-wah pedal. And I used to press the wah-wah pedal on and just set it on the tone. And just leave it like that, and I used to get this very kind of honking tone out of the amp. It was very middle sound. So that was how a lot of that came about, the guitar sound. The rest of it was basically just plugging in, and you just plug the guitar in and turn it up, you know, and it's and away you go, you know, like things like Genie.
Poor Genie, snuck into the city, strung out on lasers and slashback blazers, shit, ate all the razors while pulling the waiters, talking about Monroe, walking on Snow White. New York's a no-go where everything tastes nice. Poor Genie.
Genie was, the song was David wrote on the back of a Greyhound bus on the way to Memphis, Tennessee from New York. And originally the guy that did the paintings on the album covers, Hunky Dory and Ziggy, George Underwood, was sat at the back of the bus with Bowie's Les Paul, and he was playing that riff. And and a few Chuck Berry songs he was messing about with, and David happened to cotton on to. So when George put the guitar down, David picked it up and started playing the same thing, same chord riff. And he sat in the back of the bus for about an hour and a half, just messing about and singing. They were all at the back of the bus. And 3 days later, we went back to New York, and we went in the studios in New York, and he played as Genie. And he played the whole song to us, and then he said, we'll do a run through. So we did a run through. But I always remember that the Yardbirds had a song called I'm a Man, which was by some old blues singer, I don't know if it's Howlin' Wolf or somebody, that they'd done. And it was exactly the same riff, da, 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 da. So I always remember Paul Samuel Smith did a run on the beginning of that, and it went da 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 da. Da, da, da. So I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll elaborate on that and I'll nick it off him. So I stole it in a way, and instead of doing the single rundown, I did.
That again was I guess a tried and tested playing with your roots. I mean, we'd come up through rhythm and blues, and that's very much a sort of a Howlin' Wolf type track, you know, the dang, 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 and we just approached it like that.
There you go, classic Genie riff. Comes from basically the Muddy Waters or the I'm a Man, John Lee Hooker, that kind of riff, you know. It's very simple, very simply done, you know.
All it needed was what that kind of music was known for, just that simple rocking out 4/4 approach to it, and with just a little slight variation on the chorus so that it lifted, so it went into a normal rock chorus and then back to the rhythm and blues for the verses. It was more feel than anything, I think, why it works. You know, when we learnt how to play blues in the 60s, if you were going to get work as a rhythm and blues band, you really had to be able to play the blues, and you had to feel it. You had to really like believe in the blues to pull it off. I think that groundwork in rhythm and blues helped you to be able to get the emotion out of a song, or figure out what the emotion should be for a song, even though it wasn't a rhythm and blues song. You learned that, well, there's got to be some emotional content here, there's got to be some meaning and message that you're trying to put across. It's got to integrate with what the basic, I guess, the purpose of the writer was, and you have to be able to duplicate that, and the blues helped us get that, get inside the song and be that song, and Genie was just a good example of that.
I remember we recorded Genie in Nashville, Tennessee, and we only had this little tiny, these little tiny amps. That's all we had with us, was like little practice amps, you know. But we kind of just went in and plugged in and turned it up, and off we went. It
was a good song. We all knew it was a good song. I mean, we had a quick run through of it, and we all knew it was like I'm a Man by the Yardbirds. We'd all played that before many times as kids. And then we had one go at it, and we didn't keep that take. And then we had one more go at it, and that was the take we kept, which if you listen to on the record is where I actually make the bass mistake that's so famous that everybody points out to me, where I go down to the B too early. But it fits, so we keep it. And I still today, if I play that song, I still play that mistake, because everybody says, you've got to play that mistake, you know, you've got to play that mistake. So it was kept, it was done in one go, and everything was kept, the guitar solo, and I remember we started, I think it was 11 o'clock, and by 12 o'clock it was all finished and mixed. And a week later, it was #2 in the charts in England. It was the fastest single ever recorded, I think.
We understood that music, but David's lyrics and vocal approach to it was completely off the wall, really, for that time. But the two fitted together. It was like it shouldn't really have fitted. And then Mick's guitar solo in it was not what you expected in a track like that.
I think we recorded Genie in 2 takes, you know. We kind of did it once and messed up, and then we just did it again. We never played the song before. And that was basically it. I mean, you plug it in and you turn it up, and away you went, you know, so.
Done it about an hour and a half at the most, I should think, yeah. It was just go in, set up, play the song, get the sound really quickly, run through it once, do it again. That's the one we're going to keep it. Bowie went out there, he played a bit of harmonica, did the vocals, did the backing vocals, played a bit of tambourine, and that was it. Done. And then it was sent over to England that same day. The track was sent to England, and the next, I think it was, we did it on like a Wednesday or something. I think they had it out on the Monday. The Rush released it on the Monday, and it was in the charts the following week. And we couldn't believe it, you know.
It's still one of my favourites. Every time I hear it on the radio, it's like, yeah, I like that, it's good.
The Genie loves your mustache. It's outrageous, skills on your pole. The Genie lets us go.
Let me put my arms around your head. Gee, it's hot. Let's go to bed. Don't forget to turn on the lights.
Driving Saturday is another one of my favourites, actually. I think it's just a futuristic rock song that isn't pretentious. It's just, I think that track's going to see, we'll see more of that track in the future. I think it's been passed over for some reason.
Yeah, I think it was a rushed album, you know, it was a bit too fast. We were working and recording at the same time, and I think you're better off just going in and recording, rather than, it was done in bits, in sections, you know, a bit in New York, there was a bit here, and got to London, there was a bit there, and it was at the time when we were sort of having a bit of a riff with him. So I don't know if there was a lot of heart went into that album, you know, there was a bit of tension there between us all. We knew Ronson was going off to do a solo album after we'd planned to do an album as a band, so me and Woody were particularly 100% into it, I suppose, you know.
Saturday. Yes, Saturday. It's a driving Saturday. It's a, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir. Saturday.
Of all the shows on this tour, this particular show will remain with us the longest, because not only is it the last show of the tour, but it's the last show that we'll ever do. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I mean, he obviously decided that he wasn't going to do Ziggy anymore. And he had to kill it off so he could go forward and do something else. And he killed off quite a few characters in his past, hasn't he, really, you know. But I understood why, you know. It was just a shock at the time when he announced it on stage. What the hell's going on? Because we were going to America the next year to do like a 4-month tour of the States, and it all got cancelled. The whole thing was just like cancelled, end, not doing it. That was it. The curtain comes down.
The last Hammersmith concert. Well, this is where we are, sitting in Hammersmith Odeon. The last concert, I mean, that whole tour of England, we did a whole tour of England before we did this concert. You know, it was a pretty wild tour. I mean, places were mobbed, I mean, screaming fans, I mean, it was great. I mean, it was a great tour. This last night, it was a great last night too. And there was a lot of energy there. It was kind of pretty sad in some ways too, you know, because it was the end of that period, you know.
It was pretty, not a nice ending to such a great time, you know. It still gets me today, you know. I still think about it and think, you know, if we'd have just done this, you know, never mind without David or whatever, but if we'd have just gone on and done something else and carried it through a bit further. But unfortunately it stopped when Ronson did his solo albums, and Woody got fired. And I sort of did this album with Ainsley Dunbar, but the heart had gone out the band then, you know. I mean, Ainsley Dunbar's a great drummer, but it's not Woody Woodmansey. You know, you lose a member of the band and it changes. We were treated very badly. I mean, even Angie Bowie quotes in her book that me and Woody never got any of the money that we were supposed to get and that we deserved. We were left without anything, you know. I mean, I blame a lot of that, in a lot of respects, on the management. You know, we were promised, because the whole thing had grown up at Haddon Hall, the whole thing had started at Haddon Hall, and we'd all been involved together. Okay, David was the artist, but the whole thing had grown together. The band and him had made that into what it was. And so we were promised a percentage of what was in. And David would always say, oh, we're all going to be really rich, you know, after this, because we'd started to make it. He said, we're all going to be really rich, don't you worry, we'll all be fine. And of course, when it came down to the breakup of it all, he was gone, you couldn't find him anywhere. And of course, Tony DeVries would say, well, I never promised you anything. So you finished up penniless. And they finished up earning, well, DeVries finished up earning lots of money off it. And they weren't interested. I think that the one thing that really hurt was, you know, they just weren't interested in your welfare. After all you'd done, and because we did play a big part in that, and after all we'd done, and after we'd built up that we were all going to be really looked after, and you know, we all had families and kids, and we'd get a house and car, and you know, we could look after our children and all that, and then at the end of it, you finish up on the dole. You know, which is crazy. Woody had been fired, and I was really mad. And they dragged Ainsley Dunbar in. And I went up to London, to a hotel in London where Bowie was, hanging out with all his friends, and Ronson was there. And I'd been called up for some meeting. And I walked in and I was really mad, and I was saying, why have you done this, you know? Give me a good reason. They couldn't give me a good reason or whatever, you know. So anyway, there was a bit of a kerfuffle, shall we say, and when it all sort of calmed down, he said, oh, I've got this idea for this album. It's all my favourite songs from all the bands that played at the Marquee from the 60s. We're going to do this. This is what I want to do.
With your long blonde hair and your eyes of blue, the only thing I ever got from you was sorrow.
I mean, it's a good album, but what is it? It's an album of cover songs. There was a story once that somebody asked Bowie about why did he do that album, and he said, oh, I did the album because the band were bored and needed something to do, so he blamed us for it. When actually, I always remember going around to a hotel in London and he was playing me all the songs that he was going to do on the album, and I knew nothing about it.
With your long blonde hair and your eyes of blue, the only thing I ever got from you was sorrow. Sorrow.
It was an album he thought he was pressurised, I think. You know, when record companies, he's got big success, they want another album. And I don't think he had the songs. He'd been out on the road touring, and I don't really think he had the I don't think he had the material, I don't think he had the direction where to go or anything. And I think it was, how can I fill this gap quick?
There was obviously an album was needed by a record company or whatever, and that was the obvious choice, really. Some of the tracks I think worked, others would have been better left. Most of them.
It was all stuff from his era going down the marquee, all the bands he saw on the marquee. Right. And he picked some great songs, but it wasn't a Bowie album. It was a cover version album, and the last thing people want when you're riding on the high of Ziggy and Aladdin Sane is for him to come out and do a cover album. You know, they want new material.
Someday they won't let you, now you must agree. The times they are a-changing, and the changing isn't free. You've read it in your TVs, tracks are on TV. Beware the savage jaw of 1984.
I don't know, I didn't like that at all, that show. It wasn't Bowie and the Spiders anymore. It was an end of an era, and I think we all knew it at that point. I mean, and after that, Ronson went and did his solo album, and I went with Ronson.
I don't know if all that's true, but you've got me, baby, I've got you. Babe, I've got you, babe. I've got you, babe.
Back of the costume was tied together in bows, ties. And she's standing in front of the band, and as she's singing, all the ties are coming undone. So by the end of the song, all we're looking at is her ass, because she's got nothing on underneath. It's a wonder the band could play. It's slowly coming apart, you know, until it opened up fully. I don't know if she ever knew that. I suppose she must have done.
Now, the Trevor or I played on that one, but most people assume we did, because it seems to have that same approach. I think that's probably the only other track without us that sounds like us. Whether that was intentional, I don't know, but it was definitely a good single.
And in the death, as the last few corpses lay rotting on the slimy thoroughfare, the shutters lifted an inch in Temperance Building high on Poacher's Hill, and red, mutant eyes gazed down on Hunger City.
It was a desperate album in content, but I thought it was incredible in setting a whole scene up of desperateness and the 1984 approach. I think it was brilliant in that context. I think it stretched audiences just a little bit too much in the image of it and the content, it's probably up to that point, the stretching was just enough that they could actually tolerate. It stretched them, but it didn't overstretch. And I think Diamond Dogs just pulled it a little bit into the, ooh, not sure if we want to go there.
This ain't rock and roll. This is genocide.
I know loads of people who would love to have done what I did. You know, it was the most exciting thing I've ever done.
In the studio, sometimes impatient, you know, which probably led to the reason why we only did 3 takes at the most. He would expect everybody to really have it together, so you had to, you know, otherwise the atmosphere would go a bit sour. Once you knew that was the game, then you played that game, and it was all right.
When you do an album quickly, it's great because you still, you know, feel the energy from it by the time you finished it, you know. Like a lot of the times these days, people spend that long on albums, you know, it's like you're really sick to death of the song before you've recorded it. Not only that, is they're usually sick to death of the song by the time they've demoed the song. That's before recording it. So there was great things captured then, I think, you know. There was a great energy captured and moments that you could never recapture, you know, which you can lose a lot these days in today's sort of technology.
You've got 3 musicians from Hull. 2 of them have played together for quite a long time in a band called The Rats, and then me, who played in the area in another band, a rival band, and we all did the same sort of music. And we were all into heavy rock and blues and power music, you know, good feel power music. And then when I joined, we still had that. And then we took it to Bowie, who basically, in some respects, was a folk singer. And you put his songs with our music and our power that we had, and he's put the really great songs together, and all of a sudden the songs change because the band turns it and twists it, and you come up with a great combination, you know. And I think that's what happened. It was just either happened by chance or it was fate or whatever, I don't know, but it just happened. It just gelled. And then to do Ziggy, and then from then on for Ziggy to take off. I mean, I'd always wanted to be in a band that was successful, and that was huge. You know, and it wasn't the sort of success where you do an album, you have a hit album, and then nobody ever hears about you again. To do Ziggy, which is a classic album, and it always will be, you know, it's up there with Sgt. Pepper and stuff like that. It was amazing to play on that. That period is definitely his most creative and his biggest period. I mean, those albums still sell in shedfuls compared to the stuff he did later on. I mean, everybody wants Ziggy, you know, it'll sell forever. The whole thing was such a buzz because I was so young and I'd never done it before. So it was all a highlight. We just kept on going up a stage every month, you know, it'd get bigger and bigger. The bigger he got, the more fame he got. He always wanted to be famous, and the more and more he got of it, you know, it's an animal, isn't it? Fame takes you over. You know, I just think it took him over, like a lot of artists it does, and they think that there's somebody bigger than everybody else and they're better and whatever, and really they're not, you know. And it engulfed him, did stardom. It turned him into a different person that I'd met in the beginning. You know, I mean, I think he's back to how he was before, you know, now, or has been for many years most likely, but to go from being sort of known to being a huge star, it's I mean, it's hard work, is that? It must be tough to be that famous all of a sudden, you know, to deal with it. It must be hard enough. Everybody wanting to know you, everybody wanting to interview you. You know, you've got to create more the management onto you. Have you written any more songs? I mean, RCA need another record. You know, you've got all that to deal with as well. Yeah, so that must be tough for him. But he did change big time.
I mean, generally it was, I guess it was fun as well. above everything. You did your job. You did what was wanted live and everything else, and you had a good time. It's like that thing of the happy times are getting there, not necessarily when you get there. You know, when you look back, you realise that they were the good times, and you didn't sort of notice the really good times because you were going through them thinking the good time was at the other end. But you get there and look back and you go, no, that was a good time, you know. I mean, even sleeping in a sleeping bag on his landing in his flat, which is where we probably slept for about a year. The whole band were in sleeping bags, you know, doing the first albums and that. And at the time you think it's rough. You look back and you think, nah, it was actually cool. We got up, had a coffee, went down and played drums straight away and jammed, and then had breakfast, and, you know, it was good. It was a good scene, you know.
I can't say I would change anything. Maybe the ending, but the rest of it was just, it was superb, you know. It's part of my career. It's the highlight of my career in a way, you know. I mean, Ziggy's a brilliant album. That it's not my favourite album, but it's a great album that was, I think it was voted best album of all time for like 15 years in Billboard, and I played on it. From playing in Hull in pubs and clubs to doing that, it's tremendous, you know. There's not many people get that chance.
His skill in being on the ball as far as what's happening, what's about to happen musically, was uncanny at times. I'm not sure whether it's as consistent as it was in the early days, like the amount of tracks that you would call classic tracks, but he's still got, seems when he wants to do it, that knack to do that and to just pull one out of the air is still there.
Bye-bye, we love you.
Can you tell me about your early bands and how they influenced your playing style later on?
The early bands? Well, I kind of started off in bands where we would play Everly Brothers songs and Beatles songs, and later on that kind of progressed to more like a blues band or something, you know. Soul band, blues band, and like influences, I guess, like guitar-wise, I used to like listening to Eddie Cochran, George Harrison, you know, Hank Martin. The Shadows was one of the earliest ones, you know, because I was always a big melody lover. I used to play classical music, classical piano, and I used to play violin. And I was always fond of a good melody, you know. And the Shadows were great at that. I thought they were a great instrumental band. And as I say, from there, Eddie Cochran, George Harrison was quite a big influence. Not right away. I think I was more of like a Rolling Stones type of fan, you know, something, you know, early on. And then I got into this Beatles guitar playing, which was very good, you know. Great. And Jeff Beck, I used to like Jeff Beck, you know, early on. Still do.
Mick Woodmansey and Mick Ronson played on the Man Who Sold the World album with Bowie, and after they'd done that album, after a few months had gone by, they decided to form their own band. So they came out to Hull and they asked me if I'd go down and just sit in and just till they found somebody. And I went down and played with them some rehearsals and stuff. and finished up joining, really, because I enjoyed it that much. I left the band I was in and stayed with them. And we'd been together for about 6 months as a band called Rono. Bowie rang up and asked if we'd come down and do a John Peel show, radio broadcast. And I said, well, how many songs have I got to learn then? So he says, 12. which was actually most of Hunky Dory.
But the other funny thing is about that concert was, like, I never really took drugs or anything, you know, and I was backstage at the Roundhouse, and we were in London, like, you know, at the Roundhouse, we were in this really hip sort of place with all these hip people backstage. And this guy said to me, yeah, man, you know, like, just take a few puffs of this joint, you know, like, it'll steady you down, you know. And I was never one for, you know, I never really smoked or anything, and I picked this joint up and I'm taking some puffs of this joint, and I got so stoned. I've never been that stoned. I don't think I've ever been that stoned in all my life, you know. So from there it got pretty confusing, because I remember being on stage and not knowing what I was playing, you know. You kind of forget what you're playing, you know. And things became like, I was pretty funny, you know. It was funny afterwards, you know. But I got very confused, you know. All my lips stuck together and everything. It was like, oh dear, I was glad when I came down off that one, you know.
Can you remember what the audience reaction was to you wearing these strange suits? Because that hadn't been done before.
I can't even remember because I was that stoned, you know. So
Can you remember,
I don't know.
Can you remember Mark Bolan being there?
No. I can't, to tell you the truth, no.
Do you think Mark Bolan was an influence at that point musically on what you and David were doing?
Well, everybody was around together at the same time, you know. I guess, you know, people sort of rub off on other people, you know, quite easily. And Mark was around, you know, a lot then, so I guess some of that sort of rubbed off onto David, you know, the same as the Roxy Music sort of thing happened, you know. So it was all... A lot of it was very similar, you know, in some ways, I guess.
The scene was quite dull, though, really, before you started doing what you were doing and the other people you mentioned. It wasn't really happening, was it? I mean, what do you recall about that?
Well, just before the Ziggy Stardust period happened, there was a bit of a lull there. I mean, I just remember groups like Bread and the Carpenters. A lot of them groups, they were sort of the happening groups. It seemed like a very sort of middle of the road period in music or something. Yeah. Paul Williams, you know, all that sort of Las Vegas type, American type artists. It seemed to me like the big ones. And then, you know, the rest of the rock scene was basically all just jeans and shirts. They just kind of looked like anybody else that was walking about the street, you know. And it seemed like it needed something to jar it all up a bit, you know, get things moving along there, get it all exciting again. And, you know, David was, you know, into the dressing up and the makeup. It's kind of what was needed, you know, at the time. I mean, it gave it a big kick up the rear end, you know, same as like what happened when the Sex Pistols came out, you know. A little later on, you know, there was a lull there too, you know, and the Sex Pistols kind of really boosted that up too.
What was your feeling about wearing makeup and dresses and well, certainly the outlandish clothes that you wore at the time?
Oh, well, yeah, I thought it was real exciting, you know. I mean, it was great because you know, you kind of got to do things you don't normally do, you know, and dressing up and putting makeup on. I mean, you know, earlier on, I mean, groups used to put makeup on and you know, put shirts on with all the frilly fronts and everything, you know. And that was, you know, like dressing up and putting makeup on, you know. It was the same kind of thing, really. It was just, this was just a bit further on. But, you know, the funny thing is, like, when you kind of go on stage, it always was, like, for me, you know, when you went on stage, you could suddenly become somebody else, you know. I was always a very shy person, you know. When I was young, I was really quite shy, you know, and a very nervous sort of kid. But when you get a guitar in your hand or you're playing, somehow you're this other person. All that seems to leave you somehow. And you can detach yourself and become this other person. And the same thing goes, you know, the same thing goes if you dress up or put makeup on. You can kind of detach yourself somewhat and become this other person.
How did that actually work with clothes and makeup? Did you go out and buy your own, or did your girlfriend get you it, or how did that happen?
No, there was a girl that lived downstairs from David called Susan Frost. And, you know, David used to go out and Angela used to go out and they used to like buying material, you know, it's got a Liberty's store or something, you know, on Regent Street, Oxford Street there. And buy this beautiful material, and then they would go back, and then they would get Susan to make up, you know, trousers and make up a jacket. And that's how that whole thing kind of started. You know, she used to make clothes up for us. And you know, David would say, "Well, Mick, you know, I think you would look good in something like this." You say, so. I mean, I was never that fashion conscious or anything, you know. I was more like, you know.
When I came down to London to join Bowie, I had a full beard. I mean, I had a full beard. It was down to here, right? Because I was in, you know, I'd come up with the blues era, and Fleetwood Mac and the Beatles and all that. Everybody had beards, you know. And it was getting to the end of that era, you know. It was about the time I shaved it off anyway. But and Mick and Woody were clean shaved, and Bowie was clean shaved. And I kept looking at them and I kept thinking, like, well, I look just so odd against these two. I'm just ain't going to match in here. So what I decided to do was I thought, well, I'll shave the middle out. So I shaved the middle out, all right? And I left the tash and the sideburns. And I had that for a while. And I thought, no, that looks stupid. So I shaved the tash off, right? And it was just at the time when we'd just done Ziggy and we were getting the image together. And I thought, well, I'll shave the sideburns off as well. And then Angie Bowie says, don't you shave them off. They're part of your image now. So I was left with them. And then because she sprayed them silver, because she had this silver tinder spray that she went around spraying everybody with. And she got hold of me, and that was
When Tony Visconti left, it seemed to me that it left a gap in the band there, which you stepped in to fill. Could you describe to us, you know, what that gap was and what it led to?
When Tony Visconti left the band, yeah, there was a bit of a gap, you know. We had no bass player. But, you know, I mean, David, I think Tony kind of wanted to work more with just production and, you know, work with Mark Ball and T-Rex. I mean, that thing was kind of getting off the ground. And, I think, you know, Tony and David never always saw eye to eye kind of thing. And Tony just decided to up and leave, basically, you know. He didn't really want to be in the band, you know. He wanted to pursue his production more. And then Tony was responsible for, you know, writing, like, string arrangements and things like that, you see. So when Tony left, I kind of filled that spot of, like, you know, like writing arrangements, you know, string arrangements and things like that. I remember I'd never written string arrangements before, but I always could read and write music. And I used to watch Tony writing this stuff out in his basement. And I would help him just kind of write things out here and there. And I thought, well, if he can do it, so can I, you know. I mean, I can read and write music, you know. Why can I just do some arrangement, you know. Why can I write orchestration, you know.
She was like the fifth member of the band, I would say. She was there for everything. She had so much energy, it was just unbelievable. I mean, this was a woman who organised everything. She organised all the stage clothes, she organised the making of things, she organised Bowie, getting us from A to B. She was like a full-on tour manager in a way, you know. I mean, she really did get involved. She was a lot to do with it.
talking of which, when you went to America with the Hunky Dory acetate for the first time, you met various characters there that had influenced David and various people. What are your memories of that trip?
The first time we went to America, we went specifically to talk to RCA. It wasn't me personally talking to RCA, it was Tony DeFries and David, you know. David was about to do a new record deal. I happened to go along. And while we was there, we met Lou Reed. We met Lou Reed in Max's Kansas City, where he was like knocking back. I think it was whiskey he used to like drink. It was either whiskey or Jack Daniels. But it was a whiskey kind of drink. And he always used to drink this whiskey neat, you know, big shots. Get very drunk. I remember meeting him at Max's Kansas City, and then he came round to the hotel a couple of times, and we'd sit around and talk about the production of the Transformer album, and you know, he'd sit and play, you know, a new song, you know, kind of try and put it on a little tape recorder or something, you know.
What was it like working on Transformer, actually? How did that work out, working with Lou Reed? Can you remember any stories from that sessions? Because obviously it's an incredibly memorable LP.
Well, first of all, we'll go back to being in New York. You know, at the same time we met Lou Reed, we met Iggy Pop too. Iggy Pop kind of turned up at the hotel. And Iggy, I think, was in his sort of one of his drying out stages. I think he was in pretty bad shape. So we got him a hotel room and then kind of locked him in the hotel room and room service as much as he wanted, and kind of looked after him so he wouldn't have to go out, you know. And then Tony DeFries started to look after Iggy I guess on David's wishes, you know. You've got to look after this lad, you know. Then he got a new record deal and made the record that David produced. That all happened on that trip. And we saw Madison at Madison Square Garden, went to see Elvis Presley. I can't remember what else happened on that trip. I mean, we was there for about 10 days, and then going up to RCA and meeting various people there. Those are about the three main things I sort of remember about that trip. Then we came back to England and we started working on the Transformer album. I think it was after the Ziggy album. Then we'd done the Ziggy album, and then we did the Transformer album. The Transformer album, you know, albums were done very quickly then too, you know. I mean, we'd go in at 11 o'clock in the morning, I think it was, you know, finished by 6 in the evening. I think we'd recorded the whole album in 2 weeks. And 5 days a week or something. In about 10 days we recorded the whole album on about 7 hours a day, 6 hours a day. So it's about 60 hours.
David was good at that lyrically. Just when you thought you knew what it was about, he'd change direction on you and put a little knife in the back or a little twist to it. And I think musically we mirrored that really musically. It was like, okay, you think it's going there, but then, whoa, where did that come from? And the trick and the art was making it seem like it belonged, even though it shouldn't really be there.
Working with Lou Reed on Transformer, that was a very good experience, really. I mean, it was a very, really great album to work on. You know, Lou was so laid back. You know, he would kind of walk into the studio, like, hey, you know, like sort of sit down in the chair, put his guitar on, and be all out of tune, you know. They'd be, are we ready? You know, like, this guitar's like way out of tune, you know, way out of tune. And I kind of wander off and I kind of, you know, tune it up a bit. And Lou used to look at me like, you know, yeah, okay, you know, he didn't really care whether it was in tune or whether it was out of tune, really. He just kind of wanted to sing the song, you know. And it was great, you know. I mean, it was just, it seemed to go real quick, real easy. We'd bring the musicians in, just, you know, whatever the song was going to be done that day. We kind of knew what the song was, kind of go in there, record it, and leave. You know, it was kind of as simple as that. Lou used to say some funny things. I mean, I can't remember quite what he used to say to me, but some things like, can you make it a little bit more grey or something? I mean, then to me it was like, what the hell is he talking about, you know? I guess he was just trying to explain things in, you know, a more artistic way or something, you know. And that kind of was kind of going over my head a bit, you know. But it was great, you know. And it was, you know, as I say, it was done very quickly as well.
Genie's the classic. It was one run through and keep it. The second take was it, done. Everything done. The whole song was recorded in half an hour. That was vocals, harmonicas, the lot. Half an hour, just done. Walk in, learn the song quickly, one run through, go for it. That's the one. Done.
Is it true that he sent a memo out saying about you couldn't have groupies there after breakfast in one of the hotels in America?
The thing is about going to America, when we first went to America, you know, we had all the roadies. Well, all the roadies would have women left, right and centre, I mean, you know, and invite them down for breakfast in the morning. I mean, everything was kind of signed to room service or something, you know, and the tab was picked up, you know. So, I mean, there were all sorts of people coming around for dinner and breakfasts, and, I mean, you name it, it was, they were all there, you know. And I remember on that first tour, I remember it got near Christmas, and people would even go in the gift shop and send things back to England, you know, and just sign it to the room because it was being picked up, you know. I mean, it's a pretty odd thing to do. I mean, it's pretty not a very good thing to do, you know. Talk about taking advantage. But, you know, it was there. I mean, you know, what are you going to do?
Well, I always think live's a lot better than the studio, you know. I mean, the studio is a bit sort of like four walls and trying to create something to put on a record. There's no point in sitting in the studio making great records and never playing them to an audience, because that is what a musician's all about. You have to get out there and play to an audience, whether it's 20 people or 20,000 people. It's the buzz of playing to them and sort of showing off in a way that this is what I can do and this is what I do, and, you know, all that stuff. You locked yourself in the studio and just wrote songs, and the band just did studio work. I don't think it lasts very long. You know, it'd drive me mad.
Could you tell us about that Melody Maker interview I just referred to, when David made his famous declaration? What was your reaction to that, Mick?
Oh, well. Yeah, well, you know, it kind of embarrassed me a little bit, only because of what people would say about me, you know. And because I remember
Could you start, Mick, just by describing what David Bowie said, if you see what I mean?
I don't know what he said.
He said he was gay.
Oh, all right then.
Because otherwise, we can't really different things.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
And I'm kind of interested to know, in a way, do you think it was a hype? Do you think it was him looking for publicity, or do you think it was, what do you think was going on there?
When David Bowie came out and said in the Melody Maker interview that he was gay, and he kind of professed this to the whole world, I kind of felt a bit funny about it for myself, because not so much that he would say that, I think it was more for outside people, you know, because I knew that you know, you would get a lot of flack for this, you know, and like my family got a lot of flack for it, you know. I remember, you know, somebody throwing throwing paint all over. You know, I gave my mother and father a car, you know, and I kind of left it, and then they kind of, you know, somebody sort of threw paint all over it and things like that, you know. It wasn't a very sort of good thing to say, and especially up north, you know. So, I mean, for me it was kind of a little strange to kind of settle down to that, you know. I was kind of in a bit of a shock, really, you know, at first. And as, you know, as far as him coming out and saying it, that's fine, you know. But it wasn't really a normal thing then, you know, so it was pretty outrageous. I mean, it was very outrageous then. And, you know, and David did like to experiment a bit here and there, I guess, you know, one would say. And so I guess you could say, he could come out and say he was gay, you know.
Why do you think he did say that, though? Why did he tell everybody?
Well, you might have to give me a minute on this, you know what I mean? I mean, I might have to think for... It's not different to when Madonna comes out with this book, Sex or something, you know. I mean, it's not much difference between that and what Dave, you know, when David came out and said, like, I'm gay. I mean, that's a pretty shocking thing to say at that time, you know. And then other people kind of followed suit after that, you know. It was a very brave thing to do. The early 70s and the Ziggy Stardust period, I thought it was great because it was kind of a good time when people started dressing up. I mean, you know, there were groups like, there was like Mark Bolan, Motley Hoople, you know, David Bowie, Roxy Music, Gary Glitter. I mean, you know, that kind of period in music then, and that time, it was great. Everybody was dressing up, everybody was kind of, the music was more lively after this kind of slump a bit, you know, and it made people dress up, so when people went out for the evening, they really felt like they were going out, you know, rather than just going out in the work clothes and popping down the pub and seeing a local band, you know. Kind of made it all a little extra special again. And that was a great thing to happen, you know. It was great.
And the music?
The music was great too. I mean, I loved all that early music. I mean, to me it was great songs. It was great, you know, T-Rex and David Bowie and everybody. I mean, Roxy Music, it was great songs, great stuff. You can't help but get a decent sound when you turn an amp full on. But it never went through lots of pedals and things, you know. You just kind of basically plugged into the amp and turned this thing up.
What about other songs, you know, say like Ziggy, you know, I mean, just could you take us through that or play us a bit of that?
Maybe just play a couple more chords actually as well, mate.
I'll try and play through it. It's pretty cold here. I'm sitting in the Hammersmith Odeon here, and it's kind of the end of October, and it's pretty cold. It's pretty cold outside. It's pretty cold in here too. But my hands are pretty cold. But the Ziggy Stardust riff, it's the same thing, you know. It's just you know, plugged in and turned the amp up and. It's very difficult to actually explain all that here, you know. We've got a little amplifier at the side here that's kind of got a lot of distortion on it, and not really the kind of thing I used to use. But I think more important than the sound, I mean, I think a lot of it is in the way one actually plays too. A lot of it's in the fingers rather than just saying it's that particular amp or that particular guitar, you know. I think it's kind of more like something that you would say is a recognisable style or approach to playing, you know. The equipment helps a little bit, but I think more often than not it's in your own personality, it's in your own makeup. in your own fingers, you know.
Well, what do you think you're expressing of yourself through that, you know, as you say, through your fingers and your playing?
I don't know. It depends what it is. It depends how you feel at the time, you know. It depends where you're playing. It depends what kind of... Depends how you feel, you know. You feel different things different times when you're playing, you know. I mean, I think I used to get rid of a lot of anger and maybe frustration, you know, like by playing loud and heavy, you know. Kind of relieved a lot of tension, maybe, you know. And that goes again with saying, like, you know, when you're on stage playing, it's almost you become a different person, you know. You're allowed to do these things, you know, quite normally. And you feel quite normal doing it, too. It's not something you would walk around, you know, 2 o'clock in the afternoon showing that kind of emotion or something, you know. Okay. Like, hang on to yourself. I mean, pretty much that was strap the guitar on and thrash it to death, basically, you know. But that was good. I mean, you know, a lot of the songs had good sort of melodic content, even just chords, you know, just playing the chords had some sort of melody to it, which I always liked, you know. And then there was always, I guess, one of the favourite ones was like Moon Age Daydream or something. You know, I mean, I wish I could sing it. I can't even remember it, so we won't do that one. We can do it again, though. But,
if you can give it an intro again, just say, this is Moon Age Daydream.
Okay, and I guess one of the other favourite ones was Moon Age Daydream. That was always a kind of a pretty good one to do. I can't sing it for you, but I can play it here. And it started off like I'm an alligator. And, this part more like that. I forget how it goes, but I mean that's somewhat how it went.
Thanks.
It's a long time ago since I played these things. However it goes. Can't remember either too well.